In my short contribution about the relationship between philosophy and theology, I shall not propose a theoretical reflection about one of the problems which has received all along the history so many different answers and has most shaped both philosophy and theology. Rather, I intend to offer some considerations on the basis of my experience, only my experience, about how students who receive a philosophical training can improve their approach to the study of theology. For this reason, some words of presentation are perhaps useful. I belong to the last generation in Italy who could study at the same time in two different faculties, both philosophy and theology. The first at the University of Rome Tor Vergata, the second at the Pontifical Lateran University. When I was young, such a double inscription was allowed, and sometimes even encouraged. The study was for me quite tough, but beautiful and personally enriching. For several reasons and contingencies, when I began to work at the university, I was led to reproduce in my teaching the same experience of union of philosophy and theology, almost exactly in the same places where I studied. Presently, I teach philosophy. I teach history of theological thought in the bachelor's and master's programs of philosophy at the University of Rome Tor Vergata, and introduction to philosophy in the master's and the license programs at the Pontifical Institute John Paul II. So, I am in the strange position of being a philosopher among theologians and a theologian among philosophers. Obviously, the respective students are very different. In the first case, I teach to seminarians and to lay people who are aiming at taking a particular charge in the church. Unfortunately, lay people who study theology only for the sake of a cultural and scientific interest are almost inexistent. In the second case, I teach to young people who made the brave decision of studying philosophy, an uneasy choice in a time of widespread economic crisis and lack of interest for humanities, and who, moreover, chose to attend an optional course about theological themes. This second condition is very rare in Italy. It is well known that public theological faculties were suppressed in Italy at the end of the 19th century. So the presence of theology in public universities is nowadays reduced to very few courses similar to mine, or disguised behind disciplines like philosophy of religion, history of Christian literature, and so on. What can I say about the interactions between philosophical and theological interests? The first thing is that this interaction in the present time cannot be understood on the basis of the ancient and noble models of philosophia, ancilla, theologiae. Even the role of philosophy were the provision of starting points, preambula, concepts, terms, method of reasoning. We have to admit that the connection between theology and philosophy is now almost entirely broken in the university. The problem is not that the maid does not try to do her job, but that the mistress seems not to like anymore the maid. I'm not saying that the various models of cooperation typical Middle Ages are wrong. Quite on the contrary, I believe that they are an unsurpassed provocation to human intellectual experience. I simply observe that this provocation today is not experienced by most students, who often perceive their philosophical study like a Penelope's shroud, woven during the years of philosophy and unraveled during the years of theology. Is therefore philosophy useless to the study of theology? I think not. But if you are searching for its usefulness, we have to look elsewhere. In my experience, there are at least 3 ways in which the philosophical reflection is not only useful, but essential in shaping the mind for a better theology. In the first place, there is a matter of attitude. With a little exaggeration, I would say that I see a key difference in the attitudes of a student of theology and of a student of philosophy. In both cases, I mean those who choose directly that discipline, not those who meet it in another context. The student of philosophy thinks he has a problem, and he studies philosophy in order to solve it. This is apparently also the reason why in the faculties of philosophy there is a rather high concentration of students original, thoughtful, weird, problematic, or simply a little crazy. But on a more profound level, this is exactly the role of philosophy since Socrates' time. Philosophy means not only asking questions about world, man, God. It means above all questioning one's own lives. Where all seems trivial and obvious, philosophy starts asking why. And what about the student of theology? With a little irony, I would say that he thinks the others have a problem, and he studies theology in order to solve it. I have to admit that this attitude of mind is much more generous and selfless. And it is also justified by the situation of our world. Personal morals, economy, politics, family, education, not to speak about religious life, all seems nowadays fragile and uncertain. But the consequence is that it is difficult to find students of theology that, through their study, not in their private lives, through their study, question themselves. Even if someone has an authentic interest and a real passion in his study, it is rare that those arrive at the core of his life. Obviously, I cannot say whether this problem is rooted in the style of study or in the human formation in general. I observe simply that here is a huge and wonderful task for philosophy, helping students to question themselves, helping them to perceive that academic study is an adventure that can transform their life. Can we hope that the student who has experienced in the philosophy, the possibility of unifying his study with his life, can also face theology with a different attitude? I think so. Already in the golden age of scholastic theology, the 13th century, the problem was clearly perceived. When John Duns Scotus said theology is a practical science, because even the manner of knowing the Trinity in all the theoretical subtleties must change and enhance the way of loving God, he was trying to give an answer precisely to this question. In this sense, philosophy can help make understand that theology is a matter of love. Related to this one, there is a second advantage that philosophy can bring in the study of theology. When asking my students of theology about what they have found most interesting in my classes of philosophy, I am often surprised by a recurring answer. Philosophy was, in their eyes, attractive because it concerns reality. My surprise is due to the fact that theology is about reality much more than philosophy. More exactly, the whole discourse of Christian theology has its key points in real experiences: revelation, encounter with Christ, the disciple its witness, the church's lives, and so on. Augustine meant exactly this when he wrote that, in comparison with Plato's philosophy, Christian doctrine merely has to add a history. But, in spite of that, in the student's eyes, philosophy is closer to reality. Why? I think that there are several reasons why theology has a greater difficulty in grasping reality. Firstly, the role of experience in theological discourse is even today not fully clarified. Even the position of a spiritual theology, where experience should play a key role, appears uncertain. In most students' eyes, this is a sort of soft moral theology, not to be taken very seriously. It is very hard to find one student that in its curriculum has ever had the occasion to read one of the main mystical works in Christian tradition. Secondly, there are objective limits in approaching to theological themes studied for human experience, for most theological objects are unique in their very nature. The Trinity of God, or the hypostatical union in Christ, or the essence of sacraments can be in some manner clarified on the basis of human experience, but there is always a minor dissimilitude, as the Fourth Lateran Council warns us, that makes every comparison potentially misleading, and so on. It is worth noting that all these and similar limits are absent in philosophy. Philosophy can start from experience. It considers objects common to the whole reality. It has nothing to do with the invisible realities, even in metaphysics. On this basis, also theology can be better appreciated as a discourse about reality. In most cases, its objects are actually not really different from those of philosophy, but rather studied under a different light. In this sense, philosophy can help make understand that theology is a matter of reality. Last point, there is, in my opinion, a third manner in which philosophy can foster a better experience of the study of theology. About 20 years ago, there was in Italy a heated discussion about the structure of academic study of theology. Various changes were proposed, no one accepted. Several voices lifted, remarking an essential difference between the students of today and those of the past decades. Very often, the first, that is, the students of today, do not know any longer the catechism. An effect of this religious ignorance onto the study of theology is evident. Teachers cannot anymore suppose that their students know the essentials of Catholic faith, so they have to start from scratch. But there is also another consequence, a bit more hidden, but probably even more dangerous. Students cannot often distinguish between doctrine and theology, between what belongs to the depositum fidei and what is an offspring of theological speculation, between what is certain and can be possibly clarified and what is uncertain and must be discussed. Perhaps they know very well that there should be in necessaris unitas in dubis libertas, but too often they cannot tell the necessary from the dubious. In the doubt, they usually consider all necessary. Is there a solution? I think that the serious study of philosophy offers an approach to this problem. And I can witness that the students of philosophy suffer much less from this problem, even if they share the same background of religious ignorance. In fact, with a huge simplification, we could say that theology is the result of an addition, scripture and tradition plus philosophy. A slightly better simplification would be scripture and tradition times philosophy. In this way, we suggest that the result is not a patchwork, but something really new and in some manner unexpected. If this simplification has anything to recommend it, this means that the texture of theology is identical or very similar to that of philosophy, even if its starting points are different. The relationship between faith and reason has almost nothing to do with that between theology and philosophy. In faith and reason, we are talking about the starting points, not about the sciences themselves. Theology is the space of the discussion and quest for understanding of the faith, exactly because philosophy is the space of what is subject to doubt, questions, corrections, and so on. Obviously, this does not mean that, as a lesson believed, the quest for truth is to prefer to truth itself. But the fear of relativism must never transform philosophy in a dogmatic science. As Kant correctly said, teaching philosophy can only mean teaching to philosophize, since philosophy is not an object, but an activity. Mutatis mutandis, the same is valid for theology. Teaching theology should mean teaching to theologize. In this sense, philosophy can help make understand that theology is a matter of research. Thank you very much.